Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced he will not resign over accusations of corruption against his wife. He had threatened to step down following the allegations, which he's now described as toxic political slander. The case was brought by a group linked to the far right. Well, live to Madrid, our correspondent Guy Hedgecoe has been watching and monitoring these events. Guy, could you tell us what came out of that speech?
Well, there was tremendous expectation leading up to it, and Mr Sanchez even met with King Felipe just before he made his appearance to make the announcement, and that had led many people to believe that he was indeed going to resign. But in his speech, he said that he'd been very hurt, and he and his family had been very hurt by what he said were attacks on them, personal attacks on him and his family. But he said that Spanish politics needs to get out of the mud and stop these sort of personal attacks on politicians and their loved ones. And he said that despite the circumstances, he felt the best thing was to continue as Prime Minister. So I think that surprised many people. It did look to many as if perhaps he might resign today.
And Guy, where does that leave Spanish politics right now? What are the next steps as all of this is unfolding?
Well, there was a lot of speculation. If he stayed on and did not resign, then he might, for example, call a no-confidence motion or a confidence motion here in the Spanish Parliament in order to bolster his support in the Congress. But he didn't talk about that. He hasn't called a confidence motion, at least yet. Another possible avenue for him was to call elections next month. He didn't mention the calling of elections either. So for now, it looks as if Mr Sanchez simply plans to continue with the legislature as normal, so resume his normal life. He's had 5 days off during which he's been considering whether or not to resign. That time is now up. In theory, it's back to normal, but I think we're going to hear from the opposition leaders quite soon, in just a few moments. I think there is a possibility that the polarization we've been seeing in Spanish politics could get even worse because of this rather strange hiatus that we've had over the last few days.
And Guy, he's talked about all of this and talked about it as toxic political slander. He's talking about those allegations against his wife. You said opposition members are going to be speaking shortly. What have they been saying so far about Pedro Sanchez's, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's criticisms?
Well, they've been saying that these 5 days that he took off and this whole idea of considering resigning was all just a bit of drama that he'd fabricated in order to mobilize his supporters. And so the opposition really had sort of presented this as a bit of theatre. And I'm sure they're going to redouble those criticisms in the coming hours and days. But they were saying he never intended to resign at all. And they have said that the attacks on him and his family, the allegations against him, for example, against his wife, they say, well, those have been taken up by a court here in Madrid. The court is investigating them, and they've been claiming that Mr Sanchez is undermining the judiciary by casting in question that investigation. So this is an issue which involves the judiciary as well as politics, and I think it's a debate which is going to continue in the coming days.
All right, Guy Hedgecoe in Madrid for us. And of course, as we do hear more from opposition figures, we will bring you more updates.